money, they say money doesn't buy happiness, but money can make things easier. But really, if you're, consistently unhappy, stressed, whatever, that itself needs to be addressed outside of your financial situation. And so I think a lot of the time we see these money tips and we see this money advice and we look at it and we're like, oh, if I do that, then I'll get this boost and I'll be happier. And it's like, no, you have to address the baseline right where you are right now and figure out how to do that outside of money. And that way your financial relationship will actually, your progress will be so much faster if you don't think of money as the goal to your happiness.
Being limitless is knowing your success and your growth are built on a radical belief in yourself. Limitless is honoring your purpose, your health, and impact above all else. Limitless is never playing small, because the more alive you feel in your life, the more growth and success you attract. Hi, my name is Jamie Ratermann, and I am a holistic business coach, meaning I am just as invested in growing your health as I am in growing your wealth. With 11 plus years in brand and social media marketing, I help rebellious entrepreneurs master marketing, embody leadership, and say fuck it to the hustle. This show is here to encourage you to become more radically aware of your self-imposed limits, to break free of your shoulds, and to expand your brand into a movement led by you. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Podcast. I could not be happier to do this episode today. In general, we've talked a lot about money on this podcast before, our relationship to it, how we can grow our wealth, everything in between. But we know that money is wrapped up in a lot of feelings. And I really wanted to talk about this today with a guest who has been highly recommended. Today, you're going to get to meet Meera Shireen, who is a financial planner, but I love that she likes to take it a holistic approach. She talks a lot about how she wants you to feel good about your money, not just about how we can get our debt lower, how we can make more money in between. It's like, how are we feeling? How can we move through those motions? And in general, many of the guests who've been on the Limitless podcast before have been like, have you met Meera? Have you met Meera? Have you met Meera? I'm like, I know of her. Now it's time to officially meet her on the podcast. So I'm so excited to, one, get to know her today alongside all of you, but also two, we get to talk about one of my favorite things, money. Meera, thank you so much for joining us on the Limitless podcast.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Jamie. I'm so excited to meet you today. And I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I in general, I feel like this has got to be the top topic that entrepreneurs like to talk to me about. And I'm like, oh, I get to pick your brain about how we're kind of sold some BS. But first, tell me a little bit about why you decided to become an entrepreneur, and also too, a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So like you said, I'm a financial planner, CFP. And I've been working in the industry since 2012, where I kind of stumbled upon a job in finance after working in so many different types of businesses, like entertainment and real estate and tech and food startups, and had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew that I really wanted to help people. And I had this kind of master plan of like working for a nonprofit. And then I stumbled into the world of finance, and really just this kind of fee-based finance model where you can help people with their finances, and that's it. And you're not like selling them anything or getting commissions or doing anything kind of shady. And people need help with their money. And so I realized like this could be a really cool avenue for me, and just fell in love with it. So that was in San Francisco. And then I had my son, about 7 years ago. And when he was a year old, I really wanted to spend more time with him. So I left my full-time job and started doing some consulting work. And then that didn't end up panning out. And a friend told me, like, you should just do this on your own. You can do it. And I was terrified. And I had no intention of ever starting a business in finance. There's so much regulation. There's so many different barriers and gates to actually getting established in this industry. But I just kind of went for it, and here we are 6 years later. I started my investment management firm in 2020, and yeah, it's been great. It's been really eye-opening to be able to bridge the gap between what we learn in school and in our lives about money and what you actually need to know in order to be successful with money. And it's a huge gap. And so many people I encounter, on the surface level, you would assume like, oh, hey, yeah, you got it all together. And then underneath, it's like, oh, you like all these lessons about money never came up at any point in your life. It's wild.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I feel like I think there's this understanding of money where it's like, oh, the here's your budget, don't overspend it. Here you make money so that that you're not in debt. And then people think it's very simple, but it's about how we feel about it. It's like money brings us our well-being. And even how often we hear that saying of money doesn't buy you happiness. And you're like, but it buys you convenience that allows you to be happy. Like it buys you easier things along the path. So the idea of like, you get to meet these people who you assume are like got everything figured out, and then they have no idea how much money they bring in or that much money they spend, or in general why they decide to like ignore their credit card payments. Like there's so many wrapped up feelings, which is why I'm so excited to jump in. I think there's a sense in this, and just kind of asking you is being able to know that is whenever you do meet somebody and you're helping them with their financial planning, what do you think is one of the top things that people try to like ignore about their money that can cause some big problems?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think people assume that if I tell them what to do, they'll just be able to do it. It's like going to a personal trainer, or like I injured my shoulder and I went to the physical therapist and she told me what to do. And it's actually on me to do it. And the reason that I'm not doing it isn't because I don't know what to do. It's like all of these other mental barriers, all these other habits that you become accustomed to throughout your life. Like you have to overcome all of those things in order to execute on the steps to get better with money. And so I think a lot of people assume that having the information is enough, but really you need to understand how to change your behavior. And
Oh,
that's a huge piece.
I completely agree with this. I think this is exactly why a lot of my own health coaching training comes into business planning, and and a large portion of it is brain science and behavior. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about. I think that I feel like early in business I would be like, knowledge is power. I'd say this all the time, and then I was like, no, you guys all know what to do. Or at least where to start, but doing it is the problem. Like actually like following through with it, and it's not just like forcing yourself, it's also going, why, like what's the hang up? So and with knowing this, so like let's say you give somebody a budget of some kind, like and they don't follow through with it, what might be some underlying pieces that you try to kind of work through with them?
I mean, a lot of time people will come to me and they'll say, I've made a budget in the past and it just doesn't work. And I'm not good at budgeting, or I'm not good at money. And so it really is, first of all, I don't think anybody's not good with money. I think that we all have learned different things and we're doing the best we can based on what we've learned and what experiences we've had. And so really having conversations about, okay, well, like, what do you believe to be true about money? Like how do you go about your day-to-day life? What are the things that you spend money on that maybe you are not noticing? What are the things you spend money on subconsciously? To me, one of the biggest things is creating an awareness around your financial transactions, because I could give you a budget and you could look at it and be like, cool, I'll do this, and then not do it. But if you come to the table with like a big why in front of you, this is why I want to change my financial situation. And then you cultivate that awareness that every time you do spend money, earn money, you log that, you register that as an event. It all of a sudden, like, budgeting is not as hard. You know exactly what you're spending because you're conscious and you're aware in the moment. And a lot of the time, I think people will assume that it requires discipline when I think it more so requires awareness.
I love that. I think that's completely true. I think there in general, whenever I've absolutely had clients of mine that we're talking about revenue and we're talking through what kind of money they want to make, and they're just like, yeah, I guess I want to make that much. I'm like, well, what's your monthly expenses? And they'll be like, like, I'm like, okay, and I'm like, even too, just to be completely honest, I have a very ugly budget sheet that's worked for me for many years, and I'm like, all right, let's fill it out. And I'm like, here you go. And then they sit there and go, oh, I spend like 5,000 a month on just all this different type of vendor support and just like my day-to-day living. I'm like, yeah, so that's your threshold. Like 5K is just enough. If you want to grow, we got to get a little bit higher. And it's interesting how people like to ignore the numbers. And I've even been in part of like coaching containers where someone's like, no, don't look at your budget, just make more money, just completely make more money. And And I think that that's just like this idea of like bypassing, of being able to get grounded and knowing your numbers. And I think that's a big part of it. But I know why people don't do it. I think for me, my first financial book was a Susie Orman book. And I remember like I brought it in. I'm like, Dad, I'm reading Susie Orman. And my dad was the financial guy in our family. Like he would talk about the little things and the investments, and he was just that guy. So the idea that I bought it, he was like so excited that he bought two for my brother and my sister. Oh. And I remember like, like flipping through it and like, getting really, it's like very like in the numbers, like, okay, you don't spend money on coffees. You don't like anywhere you can save, you save, all of the above. And there was just like a very like hard lines. And then I feel like that's repeated over and over again, like the Dave Ramsey's of the world and different arenas where there's so much to be said about what you were just saying, that it does take discipline and behavior change and awareness to understand how we use our money. But I think a lot of the advice that we've heard has a lot more to do with, you better do this or you're not a good person. If you don't have your money figured out, you're not a good person. If you hold any debt, then you better pull yourself out of it. So it's this idea of this like bootstraps, like pick yourself up type of idea. And I think that that's one, it's sad for the fact that we all kind of come into a different financial situation depending on our history, but also too, we know that tough love doesn't work long term. Like we know that this is not going to be this long-term scale. So what would you say if we were just kind of giving a guidebook, a blanket of like how Meera would say you should take a look at your money between spending, debt, like if you gave us just kind of your game plan, your easy game plan. I know there's a lot to this, but being able to talk a little bit about what things would you keep of what we know and what things do you bring in with your clients that we may not have heard of yet?
Yeah, this is good. This is gonna like I'm gonna noodle on this for a second. So I would say a lot of the financial decisions we make for emotional reasons. And so starting out, making sure that you can be satisfied, be happy, be content outside of money. And I think a lot of the time we spend in certain areas, we buy things for ourselves, we do all these things to kind of reach a point of contentedness or happiness. I don't know if you've heard of this concept called the hedonic treadmill.
I've heard. I don't know if I've heard of the treadmill, but tell me more. I want to hear it.
The hedonic treadmill. And so basically, it is the fact that after like an event happens and we're like at a peak level, like we're happier, consistently we'll go back to where we started. Or like something bad happens and we go down, we consistently go back to where we started. And so if you're operating at a baseline of like never being satisfied, no matter if you earn more money, no matter if you have like a client come in, you're still going to go back to that baseline feeling of being unsatisfied. And so the goal is to figure out, how can I change this baseline outside of money?
Beautiful.
And then once you're able to change that baseline and, you can earn money and spend it on things, you realize that it's not the money. Like you said, money, they say money doesn't buy happiness, but money can make things easier. But really, if you're, consistently unhappy, stressed, whatever, that itself needs to be addressed outside of your financial situation. And so I think a lot of the time we see these money tips and we see this money advice and we look at it and we're like, oh, if I do that, then I'll get this boost and I'll be happier. And it's like, no, you have to address the baseline right where you are right now and figure out how to do that outside of money. And that way your financial relationship your progress will be so much faster if you don't think of money as the goal to your happiness.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. I love this though. Cause I talk about this all the time. Like it's this idea that like we all believe that we're all chasing achievement when we're really just chasing feelings. We're chasing how we would like to feel. And we have this ability to right now go like, I can create this feeling in a small way. And it only grows if I continue to come back to this feeling. So like this, so exactly what you're saying is like, if I get out of my, $10,000 in debt, then I'm going to be a better person. And it's just this going like, no, if I can see abundance, follow through for myself and feel feel like I'm taking care of myself right now, that's going to get rid of itself. Like this,
Exactly. Oh,
it's so hard to think of, like, people like look at me going like, what? No, I got to feel bad about this. I'm like, no, you don't. So I
no.
love this.
And the thing is, like, if you do get out of that debt, like, you will be happy for a little bit, and then you'll go right back down to where you were before, because it wasn't that debt that was causing the anxiety. It was some other feeling of like you doing something wrong, or you're not being enough, or you're not doing enough, or, whatever those feelings are. And so I think a lot of the time we see money, like money success, as the answer. And I can't tell you how many clients have come to me, and on paper you'd be like, oh my gosh, this person should be like, this person's amazing. Look at their financial situation. They must be so happy, and they have so much money stress because they're like they're not disconnecting the fact that like the stress exists outside of money. And so they micromanage their money. They're scared to spend it. All of these other things are manifesting in their money. And so on paper, you could be completely debt free. You could have a multi-million dollar portfolio, and that doesn't mean that you're going to be happy.
I
And
love
it's,
that though.
yeah,
But I love that, like, because it's really it's a powerful understanding of, we don't need to keep getting these things outside of ourselves. And I'll usually like I think about this is that, like, people like to like equate their net worth to their self-worth and this idea. And really at the end of the day is that, like, if we continue to activate our self-worth, things happen a little more easily. Like I've had a client before who had a fantastic launch, and she goes, but I'm going to lose it all. Like, I don't know, like, it's going to be gone. I'm like, you just made more money than you have in months. And why are we deciding, like, there was a jokingly would be saying, like, I'm going to lose it all. And it's like, because I'm a troll under a bridge. Like, I'll be like a troll under a bridge or something. She kept making that joke. And I'm going like, but you just had a great lunch. Like, why is this where we're going? And I think exactly what you're saying is understanding that it's not all our own problem too, is that there's some history to it. So like I was talking about my own dad, and he was somebody who wanted to give his kids everything. That's how my dad was. And he was always like, I'll take care of you, we'll take care of you. And but then he'd like flip a switch and be like, you need to learn about money. So there'd be this like back and forth, and like it was something that I know that I got from him, for the fact that he was a father. He was one of 8 so in general, like my grandma and grandpa had to figure out how to make these things work. So I think he wanted to give his kids more than he had, but then he worried that he was giving too much away. So there's always this push and pull. And then sometimes I realize that pattern still lives within me, is going like, I'm like, I want the big thing, but I shouldn't have done that for my, like, there's that pattern that I think comes with what you're worthy of. And I think there's a sense of understanding that we do gain this, how we feel about money, this like worth off of what we learned from our parents, but also that it's something we can move through. So with what you're sharing here, like, how easy is it to release some of these feelings? You know what I mean? How is it to really get through that?
Yeah. And I think that like the start of it is really understanding where your money beliefs come from. Because I remember a client I had, and she still has a super successful business. She's doing amazing, but she had this little bit of credit card debt that she was carrying with her. And she was like, I feel like a failure in my business. Like, I always thought my business was really successful, and now like I'm failing, and this is awful, and I need your help. And I was like, your business is actually really successful. You have this small amount of business debt. It wasn't like she, did something frivolous that wasn't benefiting her. She was investing in her business, and she had some residual debt from that. And we traced it back to like her grandparents, and like her grandpa, passed away and left all this debt for his wife to take care of. And her dad saw that, and like in his head, debt was the worst thing in the world. And that was the lesson that he taught to her. And so really taking the time to unpack that and understand, okay, when I feel an emotion about money, can I trace it back? Can I figure out where that first came from? My mom is the most frugal person, and it benefits her. It's benefited her all her life, but she does not like spending money. She will never buy anything if it's not on sale. And I realized like I have these unconscious patterns of like delaying purchases even when I need something. I went an entire summer without sandals because I couldn't commit to like buying the pair of sandals because I was just, I don't know, there was just something going on. And I realized like, oh, I can see how this manifested itself in me through the money stories and behaviors and actions that I witnessed as a child. And so I think the first step is really understanding where that's coming from, because that gives you context to move through it.
Beautiful.
And then, once you understand it, spend some time journaling, write it down, try to see like what the opposite perspective is. All of those things can really help you resolve whatever those money stories are.
Yeah, our emotions and our feelings about things are so big, and also too, like breaking subconscious habits, patterns is not something that's a snap of the fingers. It's being able to see where it's from and know that like it's not us, it's just us trying to move through what we've been taught. So I love that. So first and foremost, awareness. Y'all, we all just want to feel a certain way about money, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have anything to do with numbers, at least in my opinion. Like I've sat in debt and I've also sat in abundance, and being able to say like it's how you feel about that number in your account. So I love that. So awareness first. What else would be a game plan? What would you tell us as far as a game plan of how we can manage our money?
So as far as actually managing money, I think especially if you tend to err on the side of avoidance, is, I will just say right away, I'm not a therapist. I don't have any training in therapy, but my experience, my clients' experience has been exposure. Like if you're uncomfortable about your balances, like go into your bank account every day and just like look at it. You don't have to do anything, you don't have to obsess about it, but just get used to like knowing that number, because so often we try to trick ourselves. We're like, oh, if I don't look at it, it's not there, or maybe it'll change, or maybe it's different from when it was last time I looked, so I'm just going to assume that. And that literally creates anxiety in your head because you have this thing that exists and you're pretending that it doesn't exist. And so when I did my money mindset program, that was one of the challenges for 5 days in a row. Just like log in and look at your credit card balance and your bank and your checking account balance and just know what it is. And I mean, that plays into awareness also, but it really just gets you used to getting comfortable with what's going on in your financial world. Um, the avoidance is so normal. I like definitely want people to understand that like if you're avoiding looking at something, that's not you doing something wrong or bad. It's so normal. Like it's a protection mechanism because you don't want to create more anxiety, but you don't realize that it actually is creating more anxiety. So just by looking at it, you can kind of start to feel more comfortable addressing it. It's like, you're handling something, and as you handle it, you get more and more comfortable touching it until like it doesn't feel like anything scary anymore.
Yeah, it's like that, creating a practice so it doesn't feel like you don't dread the login. You're like, oh yeah, I saw it yesterday, I see it today. I love that. I love that. So
Exactly.
if I open my account and I'm looking at like a mountain of debt and a certain amount of money sitting in my checking or savings accounts,
Mm-hmm.
what would happen in the scenario where I'm just sitting there going like, I don't even know where to start. Like I don't even know what to do about this. Like what might you give advices for someone who does do those logins and is just going, thanks,
Okay.
I keep looking at my debt every day. Thank you. Like this,
I
like
see it. I know it's there. Cool. But I mean, and this is a much bigger practice, right? You start by looking, but it's like, okay, taking action, taking the steps, understanding what to do. Like we could have a whole conversation just about that. Um, I have a tool that I'm happy to share with your listeners. It's like a debt payoff calculator where you could enter in your debt and you can see a timeline of like when your debt will be paid off. And I think that's really valuable for people. Like at times it can be a little like stomach clenching because you can see that year and be like, that's so far. Um, but also at the same time, there's comfort in knowing that there's a timeline ahead of you. There's comfort in knowing that like at a certain point, I did it. I did it every single month. You're working towards that goal and then you've done it. So I think you using a calculator like that can be helpful if you're in the process of paying off your debt, and really understanding that your debt is not, and I don't know, we moved toward the topic of debt, so I don't know if we're landing here or if that's okay.
we're just flowing through the convo. I like it. It's perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, but really understanding that your debt is not a reflection of you in any way whatsoever. Like it doesn't mean you did something wrong. Like we have grown up in the society where that tells us that debt is bad on one hand. And on the other hand, like, how many times do you get little offers in your mail for a new credit card? Or how many times are you on an airplane and they're like, join our credit card program and get your next flight free? Like, we're taught that debt is bad, and at the same time we're also told that we should go into more debt by people who benefit from it.
Absolutely.
And so just understanding it's not a representation of you at all. Most of the time when we're in debt, it's either because we were doing the best we could based on the circumstances. We didn't have a solid understanding of what this meant, like what it meant to pay off this debt over time, or we were doing something to further our own selves, to better ourselves, to improve ourselves, to create a business for ourselves, to create an education, a career, whatever. And so I think that it's really easy to beat yourself up or to see that debt and be like, oh my gosh, I'm awful. I can't believe that I let myself do this. But it's not anything you need to take personally. I always, one of the little, what's the word I'm looking for? Exercises. One of the exercises that I have people do sometimes is like, imagine that you're an alien, like floating above Earth, and you like land in your body, and in front of you, you have your financial situation. And it's like, okay, this is my starting point. Anything that happened before this doesn't actually matter. This is my starting point. So from where I am right now, how can I make progress forward? Because so often we'll look at our starting point and we'll think back. And we'll be like, if I hadn't done this, if I'd only done this, if I did things differently. But none of that is productive, and it kind of just makes you feel bad.
Totally.
So if you are looking at your debt, like, think of it like, this is nothing before this matters. This is where I am right now. So how can I make decisions today and going forward that are going to make the situation in front of me better?
Beautiful. I feel like kind of like your alien analogy. Like I'll talk to a client about just attach for the numbers. They're just numbers. Even if it's in a surplus or it's in a negative, like it's just a number. Like that, like we're here, we live, we die. The number's gonna stay or go, whatever you decide to do. Like that is what it is. Like I think this idea that this is our after we finish college, our grade score is our money. Like that feeling of like, okay, this is what that is.
Yes.
And I think exactly what you're talking about is try to just not let these numbers define the way in which you live, the way in which you present yourself. And I think even too, talking more about everyone has debt. Like even millionaires have debt. Like people this idea that you're bad if you have debt is gotta be the most insidious thing. Cause I think it's for somebody who isn't in like the higher salaries. They go, oh, I don't have debt. I'll never get to the next phase of my money because I have to get rid of this debt first. Or this debt is the thing that's going to prevent me from going big with my business or going big with like travel, whatever is something that's a money goal for them. And I find like sometimes I just have to like go back and like, how much debt does Warren Buffett have? How much debt do these people have? Because it's like holding your debt as something that is just a thing, it's like food in your fridge, like the restaurant you like whatever, like small things that are just around you instead of this measurement. I think is such a big deal. And also to understand that we don't talk about money, so we decide to hold this shame and guilt within ourselves when you can talk to the next person like, oh, you're in credit card debt, same 10K, it's all right. I've taken a few of it off, but it'll fix itself. We're fine. We're good. Like I think that like really being able to get rid of whatever this boulder is of what debt means means about us is a big deal. And also being open about, hey, yeah, like at the moment the money's not there, but this is what I'm doing to fix that. And like I'm still radiant and fantastic with debt and without it. Like being able to like lean into both sides of it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that we feel like because we have debt, like we shouldn't be allowed to do things, or we shouldn't, like, there's so much talk, like Dave Ramsey stuff. Like if you have debt, you shouldn't see the inside of a restaurant. And it's like, no, like I'm allowed to live my life and have these experiences. Actually, you know what I can do? I can express gratitude for all of the debt that I have because it brought me these experiences, and everything that I like love about myself right now or enjoy my life. Like part of that came from whatever circumstances put me into debt. And so I think that we don't often express gratitude enough for debt. And I think especially in the entrepreneurial space, like I could list example after example after example of successful entrepreneurs who were at their, absolute minimum, tens of thousands of dollars in debt, maxing out all their credit cards, about to file for bankruptcy before their business turned a corner.
Yeah.
Apple wasn't even debt free until like 2005 or something crazy like that. They had employees that they were paying and they were building these products, and they still had all this debt that hadn't been paid off because they borrowed so much money to get the company started. Walt Disney was about to file for bankruptcy before Mickey Mouse ended up being successful. The Airbnb guys, like, they had maxed out every single one of their credit cards before they actually, like, if you're an entrepreneur and you have debt, you're in good company. Not to say like, please go into debt in order to be successful. You don't have to go into debt in order to be successful, but you can't build something from nothing. And so if you're starting on the ground and you're trying to build a building, you need to borrow something in order to create your building. Like, you can't, it's not just going to appear out of nowhere. And so some people have parents who help them. Some people have jobs that they do to fund their business. Like, people figure it out in a lot of different ways. And if the way that you figured it out was debt, that's just one of the ways to do it.
I love that.
That doesn't mean that.
I think there's a sense of belief in self in a lot of that, of being able to go, yeah, maybe I don't have parents that are going to do this. I don't have the investors. I don't have these things, but what I do have is the ability to go interest free on this credit card for the next year. And I'm going to go all in. And and if it turns out that I'm paying that off, I'm going all in because I'm being intentional about these purchases. I'm being intentional about who I work with, that I'm spending. I'm being intentional about the things that I'm building.
Yep.
Instead of deciding like, I'm not worthy of support, I'm not worthy of these things, or I have to figure this stuff out on my own. I think that within a lot of this, like for me, my very first coach that I ever hired, it was on a credit card. It was absolutely me. And I had stuff sitting in it did have stuff sitting in a savings, which was lovely, but it was like, but it was still me going like, oh, $5,000. Like, oh no, like this like full body experience of going like, oh no, I should figure this out on my own. And for me, I am a endlessly curious person. I'm always like learning. I always want to do those things, but the difference between someone who's just trying to learn and someone who has a room of people who are ready to see them thrive is worth the investment, especially again, like trusting, like there's a lot to be said about making those decisions, but the idea is you are worthy of making the step. It's just, it starts with like your belief in yourself, and credit cards can be that support, like can be the thing that gets you to where you need to go.
Right. And if you're uncomfortable, or if you know that you're going to feel unsafe, unsecure having this debt, then you can do things in a different way. Sometimes, like, I've met so many people who put themselves in massive amounts of debt, and then they have panic attacks and like they can't sleep at night. And it's like, you went too far, right? You have to understand your own like circle of safety. Like, where do I feel safe? Where do I feel like, okay, I can put $5,000 on a credit card and I know that I'll be able to pay that off. And where does that edge? And beyond that, where are you like, okay, this was too much. So making sure you stay within the confines of your safety zone is super important.
Beautiful.
You don't want to have financial stress prevent you from actually being able to operate your business, actually being able to be creative, actually being able to, grow. That's usually not a good recipe for success.
Yeah, I feel like this is such a hard one, specifically for solopreneurs or small businesses, for the fact that it feels like you're spending on yourself, like you're spending on yourself in a frivolous way. If you were a marketing manager in a bigger company and I'm going, oh yeah, I want to put some money towards ads, or I want to put some money towards this consultant, it feels as if you're making a financial decision that's going to expand you. So like, because it's not your money, but also it's like, if it's a business decision, where whenever we're talking about this for entrepreneurs, a lot of this feels like it's a personal expense, or it's a personal choice. And yes, it is, because clearly you're gaining your wealth. But the idea is like, no, like put on your CEO hat and go, okay, if I spend this, like, this is like, here's where I'm going, and here's why this is essential for me. So a lot of this is, there's so much wrapped up in identity. We could make this whole podcast about identity specific with your money, but being able to understand that, at least for me, what I really don't love about all of the financial books, and I've read many of them. Even too, I really love a financial feminist book. I can't remember the name. She's Tori Dunlap has a really great podcast all about money, but she's an entrepreneur herself, but her book is still talking about like your 9 to 5 and how to handle these things. And I just kind of sit there going like, where is the entrepreneur's book? Like, where is it? Because we look at money just a little bit differently than somebody who's in a 9 to 5. So I guess like maybe playing into this, like, how would you say someone who's an entrepreneur can look at money maybe a little bit differently, so we can get on the same wavelength of how, just for shits and giggles, how we have a better relationship with money than 9 to 5ers do.
Oh, I love this. I love that you mentioned that entrepreneur who has the podcast, Tori, because there's this financial planner who also has a podcast that I would listen to all the time. And he's an entrepreneur. You know, he runs like a blog for their financial planners, and he has this whole business, multiple business entities. And I remember listening to his podcast one time and him saying, like, I would never tell a client to do what I do with my money. Like, it would be way too risky. I would never do that. And that like seemed like such a huge disconnect for me. It's like, dude, your path to success required you to do your money in a certain way, but you're not going to tell your clients that. Like, I guess if your clients are 9 to 5ers, that makes sense, but a lot of your clients are probably entrepreneurs, and it's just such a huge disconnect. And to me, like, investments in my business, and like, I'll get a little bit woo here for sure, but Please. To me, I've made the investments that are about systems and processes, and I've made the investments that are about, you know, building the structure. But the investments that have paid off the most for me are the ones that helped me understand myself, my identity, contributed to my personal growth. Because a lot of entrepreneurship is sticking power and being able to keep coming, being able to pivot when things aren't necessarily working out, having that resilience. Like, that is such a big part of entrepreneurship, because it's not always going to go the way that you want it to go. And so my personal investments have been to help me cultivate that, because all those other things, those like spreadsheets and tactics and things like that, like, yeah, they're helpful, but those aren't actually moving the needle or contributing to my success as an entrepreneur.
Beautiful.
And so I don't know if I'm actually answering your question, if you don't mind like repeating it.
No, I mean, I think this is what it is that for entrepreneurs, because a lot of this is tied to our sense of leadership, our sense of identity, it can be difficult to do a blanket, like 30, what is it, the 30-20-50 rule, whatever they give for 9 to 5ers, like like, it's very hard to give that to an entrepreneur, because it really has a sense of like, what kind of business do you have? What are part of it? But I almost feel like there's a method in here going like, okay, you've decided you're in a business, there's risk here, but these are the 3 things you really should understand about yourself as you gain money. Because the idea that like, I would never tell someone to do the way I do money, I'll be like, well, no, I can tell you, I went into debt and I got out of debt because of all of these little inner child things I did, which is, again, people will call woo-woo, but also by hiring team, by literally having a coach that held me accountable to the goals that I had, and being able to know that there's like, maybe the entrepreneur financial planning is about, okay, what kind of is like, where can you create safety through your offers? Where are you finding that your own identity is what you're running up against, not actually what's possible for you? And then being able to go like, where are you ready to take a risk? Because you know that like what you're doing is worthy of it. So it's like very, again, like it's not something you can be so specific with all of those pieces, because I think each of us have different views of ourselves. But this is exactly why, when we're talking about being an entrepreneur, we talk about belief in self, we talk about mindset so much, because it affects everything. Versus, again, 9 to 5ers, I love you too, but we you know what you're getting every 2 weeks. You know what's happening. So being able to know that, like, for me, I'll remind my clients of this all the time, is that you can make no money this month. You can also make 4 times the money you made the last 3 months. So like the ability for us to understand and like really, activate these things within our business, but also activate who we are, affects the money so much in a lot of ways. So I guess they're like, I don't know if I'm coming around to a question here, but
well, I do have something
that? What do you
yeah,
think of
no,
that?
I get a lot of people who come to me and say like, okay, how much did I spend on marketing, or how much did I spend on advertising, and like wanting those like specific tactical answers. And I did an Instagram post about this a while back, but it really is like, what if, like, looking at your business and yourself holistically, like where are the areas that you're feeling maybe less confident or less supported, or the areas that aren't allowing you to like step up into your full self? Those are the areas to invest in, right?
Totally.
So if you're doing marketing and you're feeling like, oh, I wish my marketing was better, that would make my business feel better, then great, you can funnel money into marketing, and that'll give you that lift that you need in that space to boost your business. Or if you're really like stressed about money all the time, then great, you can hire a financial person to help alleviate that stress so that you can show up fully in your business. So like, what investments are going to allow you to show up in the best way possible so that you can build your business? And so I think that's a good way to kind of figure out where you need to invest. When I first started my business, I didn't know anything. So I invested in a like a business coach for financial coaches. And going through that process gave me that confidence to be like, okay, I can do this. And then I've invested in a systems coach because I was really unsure about that area and I felt that was holding me back. And so, just looking at your business from this big overview perspective and say, okay, are there areas where I feel like I wish that this was better? This would give me more confidence. This would help me excel. Then that would be a good place to start, maybe funneling a little bit of money to see that grow.
I love that though. I feel like just like mirroring what you're saying is the three main investment areas, or the expenses in general that an entrepreneur should have, is within like systems. So anywhere you're saving time. So whether that's automation, whether that's hiring team, being able to think about like, okay, yeah, I want to spend, $20 a month or $40 a month on Dubsado to help me with onboarding my clients. And I'm also going to spend, $800 every month for a VA or whatever, whatever process that is, because that's going to give me this much time back so that I can focus on the other money making pieces. So like there's time, systems, there's skill level. So marketing, whether that or specific, content creation or course creation, there's that skill level course, like courses and coaches. And then there's like your inner leadership. I feel like those are the three key expense areas. So being able to know that whenever you're looking at where you're at, is that if you find yourself spending way too much time on things and like you're working into the late hours, maybe it's time to look at your systems. It's time to look at like anyone who can support you. That's the expense that makes sense. But exactly what Meera is saying here is that we don't, like, you can't prescribe something to an entrepreneur unless they fully understand what's working and not working in their business in a lot of ways.
Yeah, 100%. I had a client come to me in his business. He was like losing about 100K every year. And we looked at it and he was spending so much money at these trade shows that were bringing in zero return. And we just wiped that out. And all of a sudden his business was profitable. And so a lot of the time, like, there are things that we spend our money that we think are helping. And in reality, like, they're just a money suck that don't contribute to the bottom line. And so it's worth assessing things periodically to say like, okay, I invested in this thing here. Have I seen a tangible improvement? Do I either feel better or do I see this financial improvement? Or one of those two things happening? And if not, then maybe those assets are going to be better used in a different place.
I love that. So what kind of questions do you think we could, like, you would ask an entrepreneur if they're going, I don't know where my money's going? Like how would you, just like you're saying, this person was spending so much money and it wasn't turning into things, like what might be their monthly assessment of where their money's going? How could you help them find those key problem areas?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, like, the first question I typically ask people is like, where is, like, if people come to me with financial stress, like, where is the stress coming from first? Is it coming from something that's actually real? Like, some people come to me really stressed and we look at the numbers and they're great. Or is it coming from like a feeling that you should be doing things differently? So that's like the precursor. But it's like if it is like, I feel like I don't know where my money's going, then we'll actually sit down and like download bank statements, download credit card statements, put things into a spreadsheet, do all of that like To me, it's fun. Maybe other people don't think it's fun.
I enjoy it. I enjoy data. You're in good company. You're in good company.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. To me, it's fun. So, like, really sitting, and I try to make it fun for my clients too, because I know not everybody loves to spend, hours in a spreadsheet. And then just going through, categorizing, like picking categories for every single line item that shows up on your statement. Where does this fall? Is this marketing? Is this, tech expense, whatever? And most bookkeeping software is really good at that. If you have QuickBooks or Wave, you should be able to kind of identify categories for each expense. And then just looking at, the big overview. And especially with this client, we had to look at the whole year. And so we went through and categorized everything in his software. And then we did a profit and loss report, which breaks things down by category. And so you can easily see, like, oh my gosh, I'm spending so much money in this one area. 50% of my expenses lie in like this one field. Is that good? And I have clients that have brick and mortar businesses, and a huge portion of their expenses is payroll. And so you get to see that all in one place and be like, okay, I know that these people who are working for me are supporting the success of my business. So that's something that makes sense. If I have a huge outsized expense for equipment or maintenance or upkeep, maybe that's a problem. Maybe that's something we need to dig into a little more. But if you were running a business and you are not using bookkeeping software, I would highly recommend that you start doing so, because not only does it make your whole life easier, tax time, all those things, but it really gives you that snapshot of how your business is operating.
You heard it here. Download QuickBooks. I actually have QuickBooks for myself. I even use Mint still as well, which I love. I actually enjoy both, but like the idea of just know where your money's going is
Right.
definitely.
And Wave is a free bookkeeping service. So if you don't
one.
want to put money into it, Wave is awesome. I use Wave personally. I recommend it to my clients, and you can connect your bank accounts. It's a little glitchy sometimes, but you don't have to spend money on it. So
I love it. We could keep talking. I feel like I want to have you for another hour if I could. But let me ask
yes.
you more questions here. One being, what would be like if you could think of like your top piece of advice for a new entrepreneur or even entrepreneur who's like feeling a little bit tight around their financial abundance right now? What would you say to them?
I would say, okay, I'm gonna get a little more woo, but I would say that,
Please
like,
get woo. I love
okay,
woo.
okay, awesome. I would say that one of the biggest precursors to having a successful business is having an element of faith that it will work out. And if you are feeling stressed about money in your business, like, figure out the source of that stress and also remind yourself it will work out. And if this doesn't work out exactly how you thought it would, something else is going to work out. As long as you're putting in the effort and you're showing up and you're growing and you're learning, things will work out. And it's hard. It can be hard, especially as an entrepreneur. It can be hard to be like, oh, this is happening for me. Like, doesn't feel like it's working out, Meera. But we have faith in so many different things in the world and in our life. We have faith in our family and our partner that they're always going to be there for us. We have faith that, like, the sun is going to rise every day. Like, all of these things happen. We're human beings, are constantly growing and creating and striving and building. And that's true for you too. So if you feel like your financial situation is not where you want it to be and you're feeling stress, know that there are options for you, and know that there are so many different avenues you can take, and have that bit of faith that, like, hey, I'm putting in the work. This is going to work out in some way or another. It's not tactical advice, I know, but that is very helpful for me.
It's the advice that's going to essentially move you from being in this fear of scarcity to moving past, going big. I think that we didn't get into this, but sometimes around these money, the faith part is deciding that you can get over the fear of rejection versus staying in the fear of scarcity.
Exactly.
Like going back and forth between it.
Exactly. And I mean, like, even we didn't even talk about investing at all or anything, but like investing essentially is just putting your faith in other companies that they're going to succeed. Like, that's all it is. You make this assumption that, like, I'm going to give you my money and you're going to grow it because I have faith in you as human beings to create something more. Like, that's what it is. And so kind of maintaining that mindset, like, we do this, we make this faith statement all the time. So just make it to yourself too.
Sounds like we have a part 2 about investing. So we'll bring Meera on back. But Meera, I love to ask my guests just to finish out our time today is what does being limitless mean to you?
Oh, that's perfect. That plays right into what we were just talking about, right? I mean, being limitless is knowing that anything is possible, that you don't have to live within the confines of anything specific. And especially when it comes to money, we hear this 9 to 5 advice, and it can be so limiting as entrepreneurs. Oh my gosh, I definitely am not saving that much. Oh my gosh, my debt is actually increasing and not going down. Like, no, you anytime that you're an entrepreneur, you're creating something that didn't exist before. How limitless is that? Like that is explosive. That is proving that there aren't actually limits. There was no Apple before, there was no internet before, there was no Zoom before. Like none of these things existed. But if we thought about limits, we would never have created this beautiful world that we have for ourselves.
Oh my gosh, I think I've found someone that matches my obsession with entrepreneurship. I think this is going to be beautiful. Meera, tell us how we can stay in touch with you.
Yeah, so Instagram, Meera Shireen, would be awesome. Give me a follow there. I don't know. Is this an opportunity to like let you know what I'm doing with my business?
Plug it away. Plug it away. Let's hear it.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm actually building a membership site right now for entrepreneurs, for specifically female entrepreneurs, but anyone is welcome to join. All are welcome. And it's really a place to not only get tactical, strategic, spreadsheets and financial advice, but also to improve your relationship with your money and get money mindset advice and understand how to, look at your money story, how to change your behavior, all of the things that we talked about today. So it's a monthly membership, 50% off at launch. And so follow Meera Shireen, and I would love for you to join me there. And, weekly Q&A sessions, monthly workshops. It's going to be really, what I hope to do is provide a place for people to plug into their finances that's easy and fun and prevents you from having like the money thoughts take over your life.
How freaking exciting. I've never heard of something like this. So I will make sure to include these in the show notes.
Yes.
Meera, it was such a joy to get to know you better on the podcast today and you to share just some of the wonderful money tips that you can give to everybody. So I'm so glad we got to today. Thank you so much for joining us.
It was so amazing to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have more conversations with you.
There's going to be more for sure. Until then, live a little more limitless. Let's go.